Right. Hey, we have success. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching. We've had a little bit of a headache this morning, or this evening, because Facebook, well, for whatever happened, the camera didn't switch through properly, so I couldn't see what was going on. So thank you for your patience, because now I can see that we're actually streaming, and I've had to come out and come back in to do that. Hi Alison, thank you for joining us this evening. I think Liz is watching us. We've got Tracy here as well. Hi Faith, thank you for joining. It's lovely to see you here. There are several other lives going on at the moment, so people may or may not come in as they want to. Hi Sheila, hi Elaine, thank you for joining us. Good evening Judith. Right, we're a little bit late. I'm going to get started and we might run over because I haven't prepped this before, although I do know exactly where I'm going with it, but I didn't want to pre-prepare it because I only have one of the bases. I have a Pentart show eventually and on the 30th of November, and I've got lots of products, and unusually for me I've got some sparkle, I've got matte metal paints, I've got rice papers, I've got glues, I've got matte decoupage mediums, and lots of shiny blingy stuff as well, so it should hopefully be good. So this is one of my you can see just how shiny that surface is, and it's actually glitter, eco glitter, so environmentally friendly. Good evening Katerina, thank you for joining us from Greece. I hope all is well. Hi Joan. And this the blue here is the Decor Metal Matte, and it comes in 8 different colours, so lots to choose from, and they've been bundled into a couple of groups. So yeah, I love them. Anyway, we're going to do something completely different. For those of you who baby wipes would be a good move, I think, who saw my sneaky peek earlier on, I have a wooden tree that came from, in the UK, from one of the cheaper outlet stores, aka TK Maxx or HomeSense. So it's worth keeping an eye out to see what bits those stores have, and the pound shops and all sorts of other places, what they have, so that with a view to altering them. If it doesn't fit your style, make it fit your style. And to start with, I don't have natural Christmas decorations. I've got blues and silvers, navies, whites is my colour theme. So clearly a tree that is brown doesn't fit with that in any way, shape or form. So I'm going to start with a product that I've already had to air, the Pentart Antiquing Gel. But of course, if you've got the Stamperia vintage patinas, that would work just as well. Or you could use the Pentart Antiquing paints, that again I've had on air recently as well. So lots of options. You just need something, and if all else fails, you could paint it with some white paint and then wash it off, or wipe it off before it has a chance to dry, and that will probably give you a very, very similar effect. So that that would be quite helpful. Let me just move that like that, that's better. Now the important thing with both the antiquing paints and also the vintage patinas is that you really shouldn't let them dry, because they're very difficult to get off once you've done that. And of course the intention is for me to knot this back to leave the white in the crevices and the interest and the texture of the wood. And I will probably do one side. I will do one side tonight, and I might do the other off air. We'll see. There's not much texture on the other side of my piece anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I'm going to see how much of the paint settles in to to the wood grain itself, and if it's a lot rather than just into the gullies of the piece, then I will do the whole thing. So this is what we're going to be doing. If you've got questions you want to ask, then feel free. If I miss them during the live, please forgive me, because trying to double up and do two things at once isn't necessarily the easiest option. And before that dries too much, I'm going to just take a damp baby wipe. You can see that it's knocking it back nicely, and it's leaving me the colour in the crevices, which is what I wanted. Hey, I like it when a result comes to plan, and it softens the colour of the wood a little bit. Hello Hazel. And you can take this back as much or as little as you want. So I'm just going to knock this back, and I will finish off doing it. But it has softened the wood, and I've now got my white settled into the nooks and the crannies that is where I wanted them. So let's just see how much whether it does colour the natural wood on the bottom. And as I say, I can always do the other side, because then it's going to need to be set to dry anyway. So there we are. We can just then wipe this back, lift off the excess. I've now brought out the colours, and yeah, it's softened it a little bit, so I am going to carry on and just add this. And we're going to be adding sort of my signature layers to everything, so you know, we don't need to be too worried about it. I will do the sides later on for reasons that will become apparent, because we're going to add some extra bits. So you can see that it just softens the brown. It's no longer, if you compare the two areas, the antiquing paint has lightened this down, making it more sort of where I would normally go to. So let's do that, and let's just give that a little bit of a wipe. And I've got all sorts of glitter down there, which I don't particularly want on that, so let's give that a dry, and then we'll do the other side, because I think otherwise we're going to have a bit of a pickle. Did I switch that heat gun on? Yeah. So those of you who watch in the summer know that I cook in my conservatory in the summer, and guess what? Tonight it's flipping freezing. I think the wood is varnished, Katerina, because it just came from a cheap store in the UK, and that does definitely allow me to wipe back. I think if it was unfinished wood, then it wouldn't be so easy to wipe it back. So I think you can probably get olive wood trees pieces made easily enough in Greece, and then just give it a little coat of varnish. You know, matte might be better than or a silky shiny one, and then you can safely add stuff on the top, and you know, and be able to wipe back as you want to. If it wasn't, then the antiquing gel, I think, would sit, you know, would go immediately into it. And I don't think we're going to get a lot of change on the back of here, purely because it's got a very smooth surface. I just want to carry on and cover the back of it. Hello Lorraine, welcome to the live. So there we are. We'll just give this a covering. So I've had, I was explaining that, the problem with my conservatory in the summer is I cook, and then my phone decides to not work because it's overheated, and in the winter, in the evening, it's very dark and very cold, and that causes its own sets of headaches. But hey ho, there we are. So there we are, and that can go into the pot. I will use that later on though. So we're just going to lightly wipe that back. You know, knock it back a little bit, it'll be paler than it was. Doesn't have to be even. I'm going to be adding all sorts of layers anyway. And now wiping, of course, with the same dirty baby wipe isn't going to help, because all you do is smear back over what you've just tried to take off. There we are. So that will just soften that down a little bit. There we are. And leave it in the base, which is where I want it. So let's just give that a little bit of dry, because the real interest is going to happen on the front of this piece. Hi Louisa, thank you for joining us this evening. It's lovely. So there we are. For those of you that weren't able to start, I apologise. I was slightly late going live, because although I set up my system, it wasn't picking up the camera live when I decided eventually to hit the go live button, but at least now it is sorted. Lovely. So we'll turn this over. So my plain wooden tree still needs a bit more of a dry, I think, before I add the next bits to it. Has now got all its detail brought out just with the antiquing paint, so which I think gives it a softer feel, more in keeping with a wintry scene and less natural, and that's purely my choice, because that's where I prefer my Christmas decorations to be honest. But you know, each to their own. There we are. I think that is dry. Now then, you're going to have to excuse one very, very mucky pot. Now, this is the brand new Decor Glue Tacky, and unlike the metal leaf glues, which are really only suitable for metal leaf, this glue goes on in a really thin layer. You can see how much I don't need, and also is pretty brushless by the time you've done it. So I know I'm going to add one type of product there, a different one there, a different one there. So I'm going to add this in layers and you really only need the thinnest of coats, but you'll see why I'm being ultra careful, because I just don't, I want to have my tree with several different textures coming down, and I don't want to, and it's easier. It's going to be easier to add in stuff as I want to, and I can come back at any stage and add any more of the glue as I want to. And now that needs to dry. Now the advantage of this glue is it appears almost brushless, and it dries pretty quickly because you need the thinnest of layers. So, and the next bit is I have some resin stars. Now these are from a stamperiamould, and I'm just going to cover these with more of the tacky glue. And it's important, you can add it afterwards if you've missed areas, but it's definitely preferable just to take your time and make sure you've covered everything properly the first time round. So there we are. We're going to be coming back and forth to the tree because I'm going to show you that how many different mediums you can adhere with the tacky glue as opposed to the metal leaf glue that only really is suitable for metal leaf. And my fingers are already tacky. You can see, yeah, that's a resin piece. Okay, it's not a heavy piece, but that's how tacky that glue is. And that has some huge advantages over just some of the standard metal leaf glues. So I'm going to regret being tacky in a minute, because I will need to try and get all the tack off my fingers before I can do anything else. But hey ho, there we are. These, I have actually used some bonding fluid on these, partly because I was in two minds as to whether to paint all of them or not. But yeah, you can. I know that I can put this decor tacky glue straight onto glass, no priming whatsoever, and stuff will stick to it, and it's quite difficult to chip off. If you work at it, you can chip it off, but if it's a decorative item with glittery stuff on, then if you chip at anything like that, it'll chip off. But this is pretty good at not chipping off. So the next challenge is to de-stick my fingers, because otherwise. Right, let's try and pop them out of the way, because I don't want the next set of glitters onto those. So I have a different plan for those. So I now have a nice big piece of paper to catch me glitter, or whatever I choose to use. Put them over there. So my plan is to go with the silvers. And I have got, now the eco glitters are not really like a sparkly glitter. I'll show you the difference, because I will get out a proper glitter for the next layer, but I think they're good to use because they're eco-friendly, but they're almost like sort of tiny pieces of coloured mica, and they're softer in colour. So the silver isn't a bright silver, it's more of a very pale beigey colour. So so I know I put the one to 1, 2, 3, and we pop it down there, didn't we? So there we are. And you can think, well, that's an awful lot of glitter that you've just poured on there, and that would be true, it is. But let me just tap it in, and most of it is going to go back into the pot, and it should only stick, with a bit of luck, where I put the glue. Ha! So I like it when a plan comes together. Let's tuck that over there, out of harm's way. Don't worry about being late, darling. We know that the lives are all recorded if there's something that you really want to see. And actually, we all know that Facebook doesn't always tell us what's going on very well. So we have one layer of glitter, and I shall be sparkly for the rest of the night, and a nice big soft brush. So let's get rid of the stuff from where I don't want it, because otherwise we will have glitter every which way. There we are. So that was that plan, and then we're going to take the glitter, and I am using sort of fairly old brushes. It does wash out, you don't need to worry about that, it does wash out. So let's just add a little bit more here, because as I say, the purpose of the evening is to show just how easy this is. And you can, I'm putting the thinnest possible layers of this on, and so you can imagine this isn't a very economical way of adding glitters and things onto your pieces, compared to using and you get a flat layer. I think the problem with using an ordinary PVA is that what tends to happen is that you will end up with globs and thicker areas. That's fine if that's the look that you want, but maybe not if it's not the look that you want. So that can go there, that can go straight back in there. Don't let the glue dry on your brushes. It does come out in water, but definitely don't let the glue dry on them. So whilst that is drying, we'll pop that over there for safekeeping, and we will grab our piece of paper. And remember, on my stick that up on there, on my stars, I have put the glue, and I have covered everything. So let me just give this a little while to dry, and there we are. Make sure that it's properly dry, though I think it actually is. And I have a pot of metal flakes here, suitably decanted into something big, and I can just now dunk quite happily. Right, then I might be able to pick those up and get those in to there. As I say, this glue is very, very, very tacky. So just give it all a bit of a squash down. I'm going to have very sticky, very glued hands, but hey ho, it's going to be fun demonstrating it, isn't it? Without ending up with mucky hands. So there we are, and I'm just using a relatively soft brush actually, and I want to poke something into that hole to get to to have that, and I will add some ribbons that I haven't got out long term to those. You can see even the areas where I have touched on the back, lifting them up, how well it's stuck on. So there we are, we have one glittered star. And my thought process is that I will use probably a rose gold for the star at the top. There we are. Yeah, that's why I've got a big box for them, because they do have a habit of going every which way, but the effect is beautiful. And yeah, I have some lovely different coloured foils, and I thought on my show, and I'm thinking really bright blingy isn't me, but actually colour mixing them works really well. So let's pop those into, see if I can get most of that off there, back into the box. And there we are. We're going to, as I say, we've got sort of there's quite a lot of rinse and repeat in this, partly because I wanted to show just the versatility of this, of these products, rather than it just being a single thing, because that's the real joy, is that you've got one product that will hold an awful lot. These ones are absolutely the same as gilding flakes, so if you've got those, you definitely don't need those in your life. Gilding flakes will work just as well as under the Pentart brand. They're called metal flakes, but they also have some synthetic coloured flakes, which I'm not using tonight, but I will use in a couple of, on the 26th I think it is, and show you those, because again I think the effect from them is lovely. 1, 2, 3, 4. There is number 5. So let's get this one covered. No, these stars are from a Stamperia mould. In Stamperia is distributed in some parts of the world by Pentart, so I tend to try and stick to those, but they will work just as well on any mould. I like these because they happen to have hanging hooks, which you know, a lot of the star moulds don't have them, and that means I can add a little ribbon bow off the live. I have to say we won't do it on the live tonight because I want the gel medium I'm going to use to stick them down to adhere into that. Let's just get rid of most of that back into that pot. You know, the other week I did a live and I put my velvet powders, and this glue works for the velvet powder. It works beautifully for velvet powders, so I wouldn't, you know, so it wasn't everywhere, and promptly kicked the whole lot flying. So I had a very bright red conservatory floor until I got the hoover out. There we are. So let's get rid of that lot. So that's that one, and plan B. I think we'll give that one a little bit of a dry, because I can see I've still got some areas where I've been a little bit heavy-handed. But yeah, I think it probably is. The advantage of this glue is that I'm not just using it for holding gilding flakes in place. I'm going to use it for several other products. So I've used it for the eco glitters, which are definitely a bit thicker and a bit more irregular than the flakes. I've got my tree from TK Maxx or HomeSense, so just keep an eye out. I wouldn't say I stalk those stores, but I pretty much do. Now, at this point, we could go, I will need to have that open, we can either go micro beads or we can go sparkling glitters. Either which way, they're going to be next to it. I think I'm going to put, so this is the Stamperia Glamour Sparkles. This is a chunky glitter, yeah? It's not an ordinary glitter, and I don't think a metal leafing glue would hold it, and I'm clearly going to need a new pot of it fairly soon. Thankfully though, I have more, so let's just push that under there. So normally I would just grab probably a set of PVA glue and you know, and drizzle it into place, but here I've got a thin layer and my chunky glitter is held in place. For those of you that like the ice crystals or the snow effect from Anna Marie Designs, then that is, did I miss that? Yeah. Then I know that you can hold, that will hold in place with this glue. So gone are my days of slathering polystyrene balls with 10 tons of normal craft glue, ending up with big dollops. I can now just add the finest of layers and exactly where I want. Paint it on with the brush, she says. And guess what? That lot all went over my table. But yeah, greaseproof paper is an absolute godsend. Let's just pop that into there. That was my fault. Schoolboy error, and we'll clear that off. As I say, it is rinse and repeat time today, because I'm wanting this to be textured. Really, is that I guess is the word I'm looking for. Where's my glue? So yeah, I just think that this glue is magic, because you just need so little for it to work. And as you say, you know, I can pick up my resin piece with my finger, and it's not, and it's not dropping off, and so I think it's worth it. Obviously, you know, everyone needs to make their own decisions about what is right for them, but there we are. So this way. So this is quite a different, you know, it's an upcycle repurposing project, really, I guess is the best way of describing it, because pre-existing format. But that's what we should be doing, isn't it, in the current age? We should be, you know, reusing what we have. So there we are, that one can go in there. And I'm doing this in stages because I thought if I just put the glue in the places all together at the same time, what would happen was I would then end up with you know, the sparkle all over the place, not where I wanted it. So that is holding the eco glitters, it's holding my glamour sparkles, which is, as I say, they're really chunky. We're going to put the micro beads on later on, and it should hold those with a bit of luck, because I've not actually done that one before. How's that for taking a risk on the middle of a live? But never mind. And now, there we are. So now I have all sorts of bits of elastic wood. You could just as easily cast your trimmings with a mould and then paint them. I just happen to have a lot of this left over. Those of you that have bought from LeBlanc shows will undoubtedly have some. It's brilliant, brilliant stuff. Don't blame me, Caroline, when you come back having spent a small fortune. So Tracy, if you've got a silicone mould and you're struggling to get it out, then my suggestion is that you fill it with the clay, and then you stick it in the freezer for about half an hour, and that will firm it all up for you, and it makes popping them out much easier to do. It's a fabulous tip from my good friend Anthony Millis. So this is called a decor metal mat. What's there? And it says it's matte, and it's difficult. I've got gilding flakes floating around the room because my fan heater is blowing them around. It's not completely matte, but it does have a metallic feel. Tracy, what's at TK Maxx? Try TK Maxx or Home Sense. They're both owned by the same company. They have all sorts of end of line, bought in specially products that are difficult. You know, they're generally one-offs, so you have, you know, per store. So you have to be prepared to go in, have a hunt, sometimes walk out with nothing, and sometimes you'll walk out with treasures, and you need to think about recycling. They're quite a good place to get cheapish canvases. They've nearly always got those in their craft section, but you know, homeware, panettones, if you like panettones, wine, olives, all sorts of spices and things. But it's definitely worth having a look. I think they're online now as well. I know that they were, you know, haven't always been online. But I think you'll find that they might well be. There's a reason why I've got so many pesky small pieces here to do. because I wasn't sure that you really wanted me to be heating, cutting and the rest of it. I will heat a piece in a minute to show you how easy it is to cut, particularly as I managed to break a piece, but because once they are not heated, they are brittle if you try and take it round like the top of the tree, which is where this piece is going. So there we are. So I love these paints because they're an interesting mix, because you can layer them up to get a really solid thing. If you put them onto wood, they almost function as a glaze, so you can see the wood texture through them, and they've clearly got bits of mica in them. I know you can get other mica paints, and they are on the market. Those ones I've found thicken up really, really quickly, and these don't. This is a reasonably new pot, but I've had the pots open for a year, 2 years, and gone back to them and never and not found that they have thickened up. So whereas the other well-known brand with lots of mica in it, I've had them a year and then they've been almost unusable because they've thickened up so much. And I think that's probably the problems when you start having multi-surface things, is that actually you add so many bits to make it stick onto multi-surfaces that actually you start to compromise something, and for some of the paints, that's actually how long they stay workable for. What called, darling? The paint I'm using at the moment is the Decor Metal Matte, and there are 8 colours of it. There's gold, rose gold, blue, turquoise, a bronzy and an anthracite, and a coppery colour. So a good range of them, metal colours that you'd expect in something that is copying metal. There's not colours that are off the pale, that are not overtly metal in there, that you wouldn't expect to be as a metal. So that's going to go into there. And let's just give these a good dry, and then I can show you how flexible they are. Maybe once I've put the next bit onto the last of the sparkles onto the tree. So now, what I wouldn't suggest you do with the Decor Glue Tacky is put it through a stencil to add it in small discrete areas. You could probably get it off your stencil, but it really would have to be straight into a pot of water, because once they are dried, pretty much nothing on earth shifts them. Now, how would I know that? Because I've tried it. So we would agree that this piece is, if I take this piece that's obviously bent because it's not sitting down, yeah, and give it a heat, and there we are, it is now lying flat. Yeah, and you can't do that with many products. But as I say, if you're not lucky enough to have the elastic wood, don't worry about it. Just you can do exactly the same thing with clay. So it's all about using products that you've got. Much as I like you to buy, because that's my job, the reality of life is you should only buy what you can afford, and if there are alternatives, then actually I think you really should know about them. Right, now I've not tried sticking the micro beads on. I've seen the videos that say you can, so hey ho, in for a penny, in for a pound. So these are micro beads. So let's just push them down into the glue. Clearly, there's a lot of excess on here, and that's fine. I'm going to have to pick those up in a minute. Squash them into place, hope that they will stick as I lift it up, because, as I say, I'm not quite running without a safety net, but I sort of am, partly because I knew there might be a reason why. What did I do with the lid for that? Just make sure, no, those were silver, so I won't mix them up with those. I shall fish these up and mix entirely where I want to go. And of course they will only stick where you've got a layer of the glue. So there we are. But you can stick mica powders down with these, the chrome powders, if any of you have got those. So let's give that a jolly good whack. So if those weren't stuck, I wouldn't have them on my thing. So let me just brush off what I don't want. So anything that isn't attached, I can now brush off. And I'm going to have a Heinz 57 connection down below, and that's absolutely fine. But I've got a sparkly glittery tree. So as I say, I think that what this shows is that that glue is more versatile than a metal leafing glue. And if you're going to metal leaf a big project, a piece of furniture, a polystyrene wreath, say, you want something that is thin, that's going to stay put where it is, isn't going to trickle everywhere, and will cover a big area to be economical. So there we are. So she says standing on a bit down here. So we'll come back to my metal pieces. So I now have my sparkly tree. Now I happen to know that these two pieces I cut to fit onto there. Now clearly they're not going to fit neatly on there like that. So this is where we need a little bit of heat. So we are going to give this a little heat, make it flexible. Give it a little shape into place. And then we're going to add, she says, some glue. And we're going to lift that up. We're going to pop that into there. There we are. She says, getting sticky mitts on each way, and we want that approximately in the centre of there. Excuse me, right, let me pop that into camera. That would always be a good sign to start, wouldn't it? I can clean off the extra. And if I want to, I can see I have a bit of an overhang here. So I'm just going to give this a little bit of a heat, which will help set it. Ooh, she says, giving it a good squish and moving it around. The express glue doesn't like you to touch it until it's set, but it actually sets quite quickly. But I can that I have this little piece that's overhanging here, so I can chop it and smooth it, and I can come back in and retouch that later on when it's dried in place. So let me just give this piece that's going to settle into there. I have a feeling that the two sides are slightly different sided, and that actually that's going to fit better. Or I can just, as I say, I know I broke this, so, or I can just actually just cut another piece and pop it on. So, as I don't like that, it's not sitting comfortably, and that, as I say, that's my own fault. When they're dry, let me grab a little piece, literally like this, and this isn't heated, they snap, so they're quite brittle. But if I take this piece, now you can see I've got quite an acute angle here to get round, so let me just give this a little bit of a heat. Now I can't see the comments because I've covered everything up. The paints are Decor Metal Mattes. What glue is that? The glue that I'm using for the elastic wood pieces, Joan, is Pentart Express glue. Right, excellent. So now I can take my piece, I can pop it into there. I might be better off gluing it in place before I turn it over the corner. Let me just take a long piece of that. Oh dear, I'm sorry you got booted out, so you don't need a huge amount of this. Let's just give that a that. So this is now soft enough for me to pop into there. Hold that down in the middle. That's dried off, that's cooled down a little bit. So I'm going to hold this, and you can see what happens as you heat it. There. So now I have that shaped in place, that chopped off, and as I say, I will retouch the end later after the live. So you can see just how elastic that is, and that's good. Now then, we have lots of different size pieces now. Now we just need to work out which ones go into which place. We'll start with the pet. So we'll pop that there. So we've got two that obviously go there and there, or there and there even. Let's match these up. Which are the longest pieces? Those are probably going to go into there. So let us. They're a pair. They're not a pair. That's a pair. Aha. That one goes in there because it's already buckled to do so. They are a pair. 1, 2, 3, 4. And and we've clearly lost one along the way, so that's okay. We've got more lengths we can cut. So let us start. So I think that will fit into there, so we will add some glue. Now you don't have to use a heat gun for this. You can use put it on a plate warmer. That will work quite well for doing it as well. So I'm going to pop him into there, and I'm just going to give him a little heat and then hold him in place while the glue grabs. And the key is not to move while the glue is grabbing, and it will grab pretty quickly. But this way it's settling down. If I wasn't, yeah, and that's because these pieces are rigid in the first place, isn't it? You know, if they weren't and it was just clay, you could just put it in. There we are. So let's pop that down, make sure that that's nicely stuck. That piece is reasonably flat. We will heat it because it's definitely better off if you do heat them. As I say, I can trim them if I want to. And heating these pieces actually does help the glue to set. So let's just pop that into there. And I won't burn my fingers. And that one can curve into there. Cool. Right, eeny meeny, I think. There and that. Yeah, it was a pain with me when it came to going online. You know, I don't know what it was doing, but technology and myself are, maybe not the best of friends, I would say. Maybe not. I don't want that piece of red wherever that's come from. We will learn and use my trusty scissors, which have nicely insulated fingers, so that means that handles, so I don't end up burning myself even if that gets hot. And the problem with pushing too hard when that's soft is that it marks your elastic wood. So you just need to be slightly careful with what you're doing. Fingers are probably kinder. Let's take something that's less rounded, and we'll sit in the groove of that. There we are. Cool. Now then. Yeah. Well, we do seem to have more than we need now, but hey ho. Right. So this end piece here is stepped. Yeah, if I turn it that angle, you can clearly see it, that is stepped, and I want the whole thing to be mirrored all the way down. So I am going to take my piece, which clearly isn't going to sit nicely like that level. Stick some glue on it, smear it about, do the same for the other piece. Fingers are definitely your best tool, there's no question about it. And then we can give this a little bit of a heat, get it a little bit more soft, helps activate the glue, which is always good. You don't need to heat activate this glue at all, but it definitely does make it easier when it comes to. And then I can pop this piece into here and get it stuck down. So I might just need 5 pairs of hands at this point, because that's quite a thin area, but it's allowing me to shape it into that curve and still have it down at the back. I think it needs to be a bit more heated. It's at a flipping awkward angle. There we are. So let's let that glue grab. There we are. Hopefully. I did put some glue on there, but I think I was a bit skimpy with it. So let's just heat this. And then let's again try the contortionette. There we are. I'll hold that down. Let that grab. It's always more difficult where you're shaping it around, you know, bigger curves or more acute angles. There we are. That's that one. Excellent. Cool. So let's just take this piece. And give it a heat. And a little stick down. Sorry, I did say that this was a life that had a lot of repeating, but actually that's quite good from a learning point of view, isn't it? Lots of repeating of what's going on, because then it's easier to learn what's happening. That needs a bit more of a squash. That piece, that's one up from where I was, where the bigger angle was. So let me see where we're up to. I don't know what's going on with Facebook with this, but hey ho, because one of the cameras is frozen again. But that's just cool. Why not? And then we'll pop that piece into there. Hold those pieces down. And they'll be nicely sealed in place. Excellent. Now then, the eagle-eyed will have seen that I had some bigger pieces cut, and I had two of them, but I will cut one. And let me get this bit glued down nicely. If I just push that piece now, you can see where it's lifted off. If I just push that now without heating it, it will break. There we are. It's possibly that I need a bit more glue lurking underneath there, so let me just try and wiggle a little bit of glue underneath there. There we are. And then we'll hold it down and let it grab. Patience is a virtue. There we are. Now then, let's get, well, there we are. We've chopped the pieces up, so I'm going to do another piece to go onto here. The piece that I chopped off into pieces was intended for that, but that's absolutely fine. I've got plenty more I can play with when I'm retouching the other. I'm just going to have to be patient while that settles itself into place, because it's being a pain. hopefully they'll decide to sit in nicely. There we are, hopefully. Get my mitt out the way and you might be able to see what I'm doing without my big head in the way. So my plain brown tree has now got that. Now then, the question we have, answers in the comments please. Do we want a rose gold star for the top, or am I going to put a silver star on the top? I shall wait a little bit and let you have a think about that. I know that I'm going to ultimately get some ribbons to pop onto these, is the word I'm looking for. No answers. Sounds like I've got a bit of a cold. Rose gold. I like that idea too. Thanking you very much, ladies, for responding. Do I want glossy gel? No, I do not want glossy gel. I agree. I think rose gold is going to be better at this point. So I will put some ribbons onto my stars, which are going to be my decoration for my tree. And in the meantime, I'm just going to give them a jolly good slathering of matte gel medium, so that they can glue into place. I will not lift this up once I've done this. I will leave them to I'll pop that into there, and then I will gild the top one. That was my instinct, so I'm glad that you approve. I think we're going to pop you there, and I've gone for odd numbers because I just think it's nicer. But if you like even numbers, then there's nothing wrong with that. Rules is meant to be known about and chosen whether you keep to them or not necessarily to be slavishly followed. There we are. We'll pop you up a little bit higher. There we are. And because this is a decor piece, I would absolutely always use a gel medium. Needs to hang off the tree. There we are. So let's clear that. So matte gel medium dries opaque, so it's really quite important that you pick up what you don't want to be seen. Hopefully there's enough on there to grab it. So let me lid that, put that safely flat over there. Grab my oh, that's nice. Facebook decides it wants to update. Great, sorry about that. And then this is just the rose gold eco glitter. So, and I've got really sticky fingers, so that'll be joyful. I shall have sparkly hands to go with everything else. There we are. Let's see if we can actually get this back into the pot as opposed to emptying it down the side, which is always a clever move. Right. Cool. There we are. So let's just grab a little bit of my gel medium and he's going to sit safely on the top of there. So ladies, that is our project for tonight. I will add or touch up the ends where I've cut them during the live. I will add my whole piece that's long enough to go across there, front and back, and I will add some ribbons to the stars, but I'm going to do that off camera. We've been just over an hour and I need to go and have my tea because tea time in our house is at 7 o'clock, and that inconveniently sits with the lives, but hey ho. So I hope that that's helpful. We've got the Glamour Sparkles glued in place with the tacky glue. We've got the eco glitters, we've got the micro beads, we've got the foil. So one glue for all of those products, plus mica powders, plus velvet powders, and chrome powders. So if you've got mica powders or pigment powders, anything from any other company, then those will all add in. So that's all for tonight, ladies. Stay safe. I hope you have an enjoyable weekend. I will do the bits and post this when I can get some decent light, probably tomorrow or maybe Monday because I'm a bit busy on Sunday. Bye bye.